So today I want to share with you the three main things I did to teach my daughter how to read. And I think if you follow some of these, and also obviously listen and get in tune with your own child, it will be a smoother journey for you. Hello everyone, my name is Nives and I'm a mother of two girls, and I've recently left my job and my corporate career to stay at home and homeschool them. So I talk about that transition on this channel. I talk about everything that comes with becoming a stay-at-home mom and with homeschooling. And today I'm quite excited to do this video. It's been on my mind a lot and I wasn't sure if I was going to do it, but I figured it might help someone. So it's a video about our homeschooling journey, and specifically about how I taught my 4-year-old at the time to read. So just for a little bit of a background, I'm very much guided by my child's rhythm rather than a strict set of rigid rules. So when my daughter communicated to me the desire to learn to read, I obviously helped her reach that goal. Teaching your child how to read is a really beautiful endeavor, and it can be a daunting task if you've never done it. Like, I thought that was going to be really a hard journey. But if you are in tune with your child and if you follow certain steps at the appropriate time in their development, things will just flow more naturally, and it's going to be a beautiful time of connection for both of you, you and your child. Anyone can teach their child how to read, but it does take practicing some patience. They are learning something that is so new, so novel to them, and it is, especially at such a young age, we need to be patient and we need to let our child guide us in terms of how we are teaching them how to read. And I think, like I said, anyone can do it. This English is not my first language, it's not my second language, it's actually my third language, and I feel the confidence of being able to teach my children how to read. I think for a child to have an interest towards reading and want to learn to read, they need to first have developed a love for reading. So if you're not already doing that, exposing your child to read aloud time as much as you can is going to be so beneficial, not just for them wanting to learn to read, but also for the development of so many other abilities in them, the relationship building aspect. And I've made a series of videos about our read aloud journey, so I will leave the links below if that's of interest to you, but that was very crucial in our journey to learning to read. Every single child has the capacity of loving reading, but for that to happen, you as the parent need to present your child with beautiful, with good, with true ideas in the form of stories, in the form of poetry, in the form of reading the Bible, in the form of fairy tales, you name it. It needs to be good quality content that's going to leave your child wondering, that's gonna get their imagination running wild, and that's just gonna feed their soul with beautiful ideas. This means bringing in books into your home and making time to read those books with your child, making a sacred time in your day. It can be in the morning, it can be in the afternoon, in the evening, but like, have a sacred time where you know that that is what you're doing. You're sitting down and you're reading books together. Besides the imagination and the excitement of a brand new story or a well-loved story that they want to read over and over again, reading aloud also helps them learn to recognize sounds. It helps them learn to get familiar with certain words, and learning to read really starts with reading aloud with your children. So for us, that means reading chapter books in the morning when my children are eating their breakfast. It means making time for poetry, tea time in the middle of the day somewhere during the week. It means reading at nighttime, reading throughout the day. All of that is just so conducive to your child learning that love of reading. So if you're not already offering your children a literary feast, I highly recommend you start with that before you jump into the formality of reading lessons. My step number 2 is to teach your children the sound that the letters make. So you can start that at an early age. I've already started that with my 2-year-old. If we have, let's say, an alphabet puzzle, and I'm going through the letter names with her, we're singing the song, I would stop and tell her, yeah, this is B for Baba. Baba's grandma in my language, and just letting her know and learn the sound of these letters. I mean, she will not know them as I say them, but it will become more and more familiar to her. And eventually, as she grows older, it will be easier for her to learn these sounds. So something I did is I've created these flashcards and I tried to find them, and for the life of me, I have no clue where I've put them. We've already, finished going through them, though I wanted to keep them for my second born. But anyway, I created these flashcards and I wrote each letter in its lowercase format, which I highly recommend you do too, because most stories are written in the lowercase format. And the faster your child learns what letter it is in the lowercase format, the faster they will learn the sound of the letters and will learn how to read. So I wrote A, B, C, and I had them all individually on each card, and I would flash the cards to my daughter and tell her the name of these letters. And I would go over that several times throughout many weeks, or a couple of weeks, and then eventually she started obviously recognizing some of those sounds. So once I saw that she was ready, I started asking her to name those letters. I didn't want to start quizzing her before, because I didn't want her to feel like it is so difficult for her to learn, or like she's already failing at this skill that she should be excited about. So I really wanted her to, through my repetition, see what those sounds are, like hear those sounds, understand them, and then we would go over it, her and I would flash the letters and she would tell me the sound of the letter. And eventually I started shuffling the cards, and again, she would get the sound of the letter. And I did that alongside with some games. And that's the thing, learning to read doesn't have to be so monotonous. You don't need to be sitting down with her for a formal lesson until they're ready to do that. So there's so many games and fun things you can do with your child, which are highly recommended, especially at such a young age. And it's just gonna motivate them to want to learn and to get better and better at the skill. Exposing your child to the alphabet letters as much as possible is just so useful. So we had an alphabet puzzle, but what I found even more useful is having a little basket. Oh, great basket of things here. Let me get my stuff. Okay, so let me get my stuff here. But something we did are these using flashcards for sight words. I used to have, or I still have them somewhere, much simpler words like 3-letter, 1 single vowel word. And then, I would flash that and I would show her, I would tell her. So it was the beginning of her learning to read. I have them in English. I have some in French because I grew up in French, so I am going to teach her French. We haven't started with French. That's a whole other battle. And maybe I'll report on how that goes once we start learning to read in French. So we would use those and we would play with them, and my daughter would get really excited. Something else we had is we have this memory game where she would match the picture, but it would also say the word. So, I would make sure she pays attention. Like I would underline the word like pear, and there's another pear when she would find it. Another thing that really helped are these resin letters we have. And they're just beautiful letters. Don't know what way I'm supposed to hold it. And I would sometimes make sensory bins out of these and play games where she has to match an object to the letter sound. Another thing I did with her when we were starting to learn the sound of the letters is I would write the letter on the post-it and I would put them on different objects, and then she would do a little scavenger hunt. So I would tell her, all right, so now can you find all the post-its that are on objects starting with the letter S? And then she would run around and she would find the post-its and she would name the object. And that way, through that repetition and through fun, it was just such an easier process for her to learn the sound of the letters. Another fun game I have is the alphabet Go Fish. So these are just Go Fish cards. They come with illustrations of animals and then letter sounds. So we would play together and I would say, do you have K for kangaroo? And she would, at that point, she would be pretty comfortable with telling me that yes, she does, or no, she doesn't, because we had done so many other games and we had gone over our alphabet flashcards that she knew what sound the letters make. Something else that was great in helping my daughter learn the connection between the letter, what they look like, and their sound was using a sand tray and teaching her how to trace in there. So we just used corn flour. I had it in a little dish, and as we were learning our letter sounds, I would ask her to work on her tracing skills just with her finger, which is so much easier at that age than if I was to ask her to write those letters. That's something we haven't started yet because I see she's not quite there yet. And so using those other ways like a sand tray helps her develop her dexterity in her hands and helps her make that connection between the sound and what that letter looks like, what that letter feels like, which brings me to another point. I have this alphabet wooden board and she has normally a little wooden pencil that comes with it, and she traces through these letters. So we have lowercase on this side and uppercase on that side, and just having the feeling of the letters, knowing what they feel like. Same with those resin letters, they're hard and each letter is in uppercase, but she can feel what the letters feel like. So it just helps her brain connect the dots when it comes to learning how to read, knowing and understanding these letters. On this, she can see how certain letters curve a certain way. She can see which letters have more of straight lines. And it's just a wonderful tool, I think, when you're teaching your children how to read and how to write as well. Songs are another great way to teach your child to make the connection between the sounds and the words and the letters. So say you're singing Old MacDonald Had a Farm, you can stop after and ask your child, hey, so what letter does Old MacDonald start with? What does MacDonald start with? And then they can say, it's sound and then what letter is that? It's letter M. And then they will make those associations and it will get in their head through nursery rhymes, through little children's songs. It's just a wonderful way for your child to learn a little bit more naturally, again, than just sitting down and trying to cram things in their head that they might not be ready for at that point. Another fun way is to have objects in a basket and play a little game where you ask your child, okay, can you find me the animal that starts with the letter D? And then they would look around, so D, and then they would pull out their duck, or if they don't pull out their duck, you can try again, or you can correct them, or you can say, oh, D for duck, and you never want to make them feel like they're getting it wrong. You want to keep it fun, you want to keep it upbeat, and so play really allows you to do that. Okay, so now we're moving on to number 3, and that is more of the formal sitting down and learning to read and what kind of program you can use. So I will be using a Charlotte Mason curriculum when we start formal education, but the program I used is not a Charlotte Mason inspired program. So once my daughter had mastered the sound that the letters make, I moved on to a curriculum, and this is what I used. I used the trusty Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons. And this one has been recommended to me by other homeschooling parents. And funny fact is, we started using this when she was just over 3, before I found Charlotte Mason and before I knew that I shouldn't be pushing formal education. We started using this and she was doing great. but there was a lot of resistance, and I noticed that. And then I discovered Charlotte Mason. I started reading through home education, and to my horror, I realized that I should have been using that time with my daughter to read to her, to play with her, rather than sitting down and drilling reading into her. So we stopped that for a while until she came back to me and said, hey, you know those lessons we were doing? I'd like to start them again. And so we actually got through 50 of them before we stopped. So we were halfway through. But yeah, I waited until she was ready and until she told me, by the time I'm 5, I want to know how to read a book. That was a goal that she came to me with and she communicated to me. And so I was never going to deny her of that education. So yes, we stopped, and then we started again when she was just over 4, and we started with Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons, and we've been going through it this whole past year, and I would honestly highly recommend it. So the book uses directive instructions. So as a parent teacher, you're given a set of instructions during each lesson. So it's written in pink, so you see it tells you word for word what to say to your child. Starts with introducing the program. I'm going to teach you how to read. We're going to work for about 15 minutes on the first lesson. The work is hard, but you can do it. And it's just making sure that you are giving your child the proper, right, and clear instructions, which I think it really achieves. It also has a little grid for parents to let you know what sound pronunciation to use, because certain letters come with symbols like a little line over a letter A, and because they want you to pronounce the letter A when it's written that way as A, like 8, or if it doesn't have a line, it would be pronounced like A, like so. And so yes, and then they also tell you, is it whispered, like the sound P, and what lesson it's introduced in. And so you have 100 lessons, and it starts very basic. And because my daughter already had knowledge of the sounds, it went pretty smoothly in terms of recognizing the sounds and saying them. But I don't think it's even necessary if you're using this book actually to have the knowledge of the sounds. I think it helps, and I think it helps them want to learn because they've been learning through fun games, and they've been learning through songs and through stories and through nursery rhymes and through playing with toys. So it helps them want to learn to read, whereas I think if I would have sat down with this just with her, it would have caused a lot of resistance, and it would have been quite boring for a child that age. The lessons are fairly short, so I would say it's about 15 minutes per lesson. As you progress, it might be longer because eventually they start reading little stories throughout pretty early, and then eventually the stories get longer and longer, and they read them 2 times, and you get to ask them questions as the parent teacher to make sure that they do understand what it is they're reading. And so it helps them also use their cognitive abilities to not just read and parrot something out, but to truly take the time to understand what it is they're reading. And then there's also an image normally that comes with it, and using the text they've read, they can answer the questions about that picture. They can understand what is happening in that picture. So for us using this book, it looked like doing it about 3 times a week, and we would do it when my youngest daughter would be napping or on her quiet time. We would sit down. At first it was more of a formal learning where I would make a snack, bring her a glass of milk, and we would sit at the kitchen table. But then eventually it just evolved into us cuddling on the couch with this book and going through a lesson. And we just do a lesson a day, and then we move on to playing. And as a side note to this book, as we were going through these lessons, we would of course continue to do a lot of read aloud time. And at that point, whenever I would be reading with her, say a children's book, we would be reading together, and I would underline the word that I'm reading so that she can make that connection with the word and the sound. And it helped her, I think, understand as we were learning through this book a little bit faster. And once your child finishes Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons, they will be able to read at grade 1 and grade 2 level. So that's where my daughter is right now, and I'm really, really proud of her. She's worked so hard, and she feels so proud every time she can read something. So we've now moved on to reading real books. I have this book, actually has a list of books that they recommend starting with, because they say if you give books that are a little bit too difficult for your child to read, and most books are written in a 5th or 6th grade level, they might become discouraged, and it might just undo all that process that you guys have worked on so hard. But my problem was I couldn't find a lot of these books at the library or on Amazon, so I started introducing simple stories or children's stories with words that I knew she could recognize and that weren't too complex yet. And honestly, she's been doing really well. Even things like taking a Berenstain Bears story, she can read through most of that. So that's how we practice now. And it doesn't even need to be books. It can be simple nursery rhymes like Itsy Bitsy Spider or Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, or other nursery rhymes where they can start reading those as well. Okay, so I said I have 3 tips, but I actually have a bonus tip. So let's call it 4 tips. And this one is for you, the parent, and something that I've realized through my experience in teaching my child to read. And I think it's gonna help you, it's gonna help your child a lot. So these are just a few little tips to help you prepare as the parent. Something I recommend you do is that you yourself learn the correct pronunciation of sounds that the words make. Especially for me, English was not my first language, so I learned English by ear. So I'm kind of getting a formal education teaching my child how to read in English. But yeah, familiarizing yourself. A lot of English people also are not necessarily familiar with what sound a letter would make. Like, how would you make the sound of the letter G? A lot of people would think it's J when it's actually G, the most common of the sounds. And another thing I can't say enough is that for a child, acquiring the ability to read is a big skill. It's not an easy task. It takes a lot of work. And so for us adults, we need to put ourselves in their shoes and understand why suddenly the sound when they understood it last week, they can no longer understand it today. And sometimes I would get quite impatient with my daughter, and that just created resistance, it created conflict, and it kind of strained our relationship during those times when I would do that. So I had to reevaluate how I come to these lessons as a parent teacher. I needed to work on being calm. I needed to work on being positive with her. I needed to work on being patient. And I needed to work on being present and really understanding that this is something she's learning for the very first time. This is something I've known my entire life. If they get fidgety, if they get frustrated, if they get impatient, back off and take a break. It's time for a break. So don't push too hard, because you'll take away the pleasure of learning to read. And if your child is being resistant and you're refusing to take a break and instead you're trying to push through, that's just going to put a strain on your relationship. And your relationship with your child is far more important than them learning to read at this stage in their life. They will get there. Every single child will get there. It's just a matter of time. And through that time, we need to be wise in how we talk to our children, how we show our children that we believe in them, and that we don't push them beyond their means either. So when I started showing up as a more connected, more patient, more loving parent, and I applied that in my lessons to my daughter, she started being able to concentrate better, being able to focus better, being able to learn better. And I think that goes a long way. I think you as a parent really need to prepare yourself to be as patient as can be. And as parents, we have so much impact in how these lessons will be received and how the time together will be perceived. So we need to do our best here. You can make these lessons a really special time with your child. You can, set the atmosphere. Like, you can get them a nice snack and get them a nice glass of milk and sit down with them and make this a really special time when they know in the middle of their day they get to relax and ease into reading, as opposed to it being so structured and such a time that they dread as part of their day. And if you and your child find that these lessons bring out more frustration and more bad than good, I recommend you take a break. And I don't mean just take a 15-minute break. I mean, take a break for as long as it takes. It's okay to take a break for many weeks. It's okay to come back to it after. Your child will have not lost everything they've learned. You might need to do a little bit more revising, but they will get there again. I think it's so helpful to just step back from something and come back at it when you have learned to be more patient and more calm, and when your child feels more ready to do so. So again, there's no fast build in learning to read. It's a child-led process, and when your child is ready to do it, they will do it. So if your child, if you're watching this video and you feel like your child is just not there yet, or your child might be even older and you wonder, is he ever going to learn to read? You're feeling discouraged. Your child will learn to read. It's just not what they should be focusing on right now. I think that there's so much time for play, there's so much time for fun, and again, you can still teach them these little lessons through, for example, teaching them sounds or teaching them words through play, through music, through nursery rhymes, through flashcards. Just find other ways to connect with your child and to bring these lessons to life without necessarily a sit-down curriculum. Do not feel like your child is behind. Please, every child goes at their own rhythm, and you have to be the one who follows your child's rhythm. So if formal lessons are not working out right now for your child, that's okay. There will be time, and this is not a race to who can learn to read the fastest. If you're watching and you want to teach your child how to read, I really hope these tips were helpful to you. And if you try some of these out, I would love to know how it went, and I would love to hear about your experience. And again, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, everyone.